their briefings. I would also like to thank Ms. Inga Ashing for the briefing on the very devastating consequences of the situation in Gaza. I would like to say that it's very important for the very moving testimony of Ms. Grzewski to be heard. She is extremely courageous, and we're pleased she was here in the Council. Sir, France reiterates that it stands firmly in solidarity with the families of all hostages who must be released immediately. France denounces the barbaric cruelty of the treatment and the way they are treated by Hamas, and the ghastly stage images made by this terrorist movement. I would convey my heartfelt thoughts to the family of our compatriot Ohad Yalhoumi, assassinated in Gaza. We will continue to act unfailingly to ensure the return of all the hostages, and we will continue to rally against anti-Semitism and the barbaric acts that anti-Semitism engenders throughout the world. Sir, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is tragic. Famine is rife in the Gaza governorate, as has been confirmed by the UN on Friday last week. The use of famine as a weapon of war is likely to constitute a war crime. At the beginning of this week, harrowing images reached us of new Israeli strikes on the Khan Yunis hospital, which killed numerous civilians, including journalists. This is unacceptable. Civilians and journalists must be protected under all circumstances. France is concerned by the tragic situation for children, which is continuing to deteriorate. As we've heard from Ms. Inga Ashing's statement, Israel, in line with international law, is bound to ensure the protection of civilian populations and infrastructure and to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance. Civilians, including journalists and humanitarian workers, must not be targeted, whatever their nationality. This Council must speak with one voice on this issue. France stands ready to support all Security Council initiatives along these lines. The approval by the Israeli government of the expansion of military operations in Gaza and the occupation plan of Gaza seems as if they're forging ahead regardless. These operations will in no way ensure Israel's security. France reiterates its opposition to all forced displacement of the people in Gaza that would constitute a new grave violation of international law. Mr. President, there is an alternative that France and the other signatory states of the New York Declaration proposed: an immediate and permanent ceasefire. That is the top priority. And France is grateful for the unfailing efforts of Qatar, Egypt, and the US to achieve this. Also, the release of all hostages, mass delivery of humanitarian assistance, and a lasting political solution, including the disarmament of Hamas and the deployment of a temporary international stabilization mission. This mission's aim would be to ensure the security of Israelis and Palestinians, to enable the return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza, and to contribute to the implementation of the two-state solution. France will work along these lines with its partners. France, furthermore, calls upon the member states of the United Nations who have not yet done so to endorse the New York Declaration. The implementation of the two-state solution is threatened more and more each day. In the West Bank, the approval of the E1 settlement project by the Israeli authorities has an assumed aim of making the implementation of a Palestinian state impossible. France reiterates its condemnation of settlements and of all the tension and violence that this caused. France will remain mobilized alongside its European partners to bring an end to this, including through new sanctions against those individuals and entities responsible for settlement activity. Mr. President, we are at a crossroads today. Our mobilization must not flag. We need to draw on the success of the international conference that took place here in New York in July, and we need to keep going along the right tracks. The future of all inhabitants of Israel and Palestine depends on it today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, allow me to thank ASG Masuya and Chief Executive Officer Ashing for their powerful briefings. Through you, I would like to extend Denmark's sincere gratitude to your teams and organizations for their life-saving work in Gaza, operating in unimaginably difficult circumstances. I also thank Deputy Special Coordinator Alak Barrow for his insightful briefing. Ms. Skutsevsky, thank you for your courageous testimony. The horrors you and your loved one have suffered are simply unthinkable. I assure you, we are not, and we have not, been silent in the face of these heinous acts. Mr. President, there is no denying it. The famine that we have all feared is now a confirmed fact in Gaza City, and it is expected to affect more areas by September. At least 500,000 people in Gaza are facing the most severe conditions of starvation, destitution, and death. This famine is not an unforeseeable disaster, not a sudden shock that caught us unprepared and by surprise. It was never inevitable, nor beyond prevention. This famine is first and foremost a result of Israel's actions to restrict humanitarian aid, including food and other essential goods. We urge Israel to immediately change course. Immediate, large-scale, unobstructed, multi-sectoral humanitarian assistance is critical to avert further destitution, starvation, and death. Immediate and decisive action will save lives. Mr. President, we are deeply shocked by another attack on a medical facility in Gaza, namely the Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis this Monday. Civilians, health workers, and journalists must be protected. In order to lessen the enormous pressure on Gaza's health facilities, we call for the resumption of medical evacuation corridors from Gaza to the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Additionally, we call on Israel to lift restrictions on essential medicines and medical equipment to Gaza that are currently denied on the grounds of being dual use. Civilians, including humanitarian workers and UN personnel, as well as civilian infrastructure, must be protected by all parties in accordance with international humanitarian law. The full-fledged UN humanitarian aid system must immediately and unconditionally be allowed to return. Due to Israel's new restrictive registration requirements, essential international NGOs may be forced to leave imminently, which would further worsen the already catastrophic humanitarian situation. We repeat our call on the government of Israel to provide authorization for all international NGO aid shipments. Humanitarian aid must cease to be politicized and used as a political bargaining chip in Gaza. Mr. President, in the midst of this catastrophic situation, a military campaign targeted at Gaza City is being launched by Israel. We condemn this decision, which will only lead to more unbearable suffering for the civilians of Gaza City. We urge Israel to halt this operation. Mr. President, Denmark reiterates its firm condemnation of the heinous terrorist attacks on 7 October 2023 perpetrated by Hamas. There can be no justification for this attack, nor for the despicable maltreatment of the hostages. However, we have consistently stressed that Israel's response must be exercised in compliance with international law and with full respect for international humanitarian law. The fight against terrorism cannot come at the expense of the rules that safeguard humanity. We reiterate our support for the mediation efforts by the US, Egypt, and Qatar, and repeat calls to reach an agreement for an immediate and lasting ceasefire and an immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, including, of course, Mizgusevsky, your partner. Mr. President, with the world's attention on Gaza, Israel has decided to approve the E1 settlement plan that, if implemented, will divide a Palestinian state and thereby undermine the two-state solution. Denmark strongly condemns this decision, which is taken in the midst of deeply unsettling reports of intensifying violence, intimidation, and land grabbing in the West Bank. Mr. President, in closing, we need initiatives that bring us closer to the two-state solution, not further away from it. We need initiatives aimed at lasting peace and security for both Israelis and Palestinians. Denmark stands ready to support such initiatives and reiterates our steadfast commitment to the two-state solution as the only viable solution for peace in the Middle East. And I thank you.
Agradezco a la delegación de Dinamarca.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement.